Hello class and welcome back to Algebra 1B Bootcamp. Today we are talking about functions and function notation. The first thing we need to discuss is what is a function? What makes a function? A function is a relationship in which each input has exactly one output. And that terminology might be a little confusing to you. You can also think of it as each x has exactly one y. Or you could even think of it as each number in the domain goes to exactly one number in the range. Let's look at a couple examples. You can see this represented in a lot of different ways. When you're looking at a table, you can tell that a table is an example of a function if you look here at your input values or your x values. As long as each x value has its own y value, you have a function. If we come over here to the non-example, if you notice, 4 has two outputs. 4 has an output of 7, and 4 has an output of 14. So it's not a function because the 4s have two different outputs. Let's look at these weird bubbles. The bubbles are another common way that you might see functions represented. If you're looking at the bubble, again, typically the bubble on the left is your x values, your inputs, and the right is your y values. So if we look, A goes to D, B goes to F, C goes to F, and D goes to E. So this represents a function because each y goes to one x. It's okay that B and C go to F, go to the same value, but if we go to the other set of bubbles, if you notice, 2 has two outputs. 2 outputs 4 and 2 outputs 5. Right away, it's not a function because 2 has two outputs. When we're looking at a graph, we use what's called the vertical line test. And basically what we do is we look at our graph, and we're looking to see if I draw in vertical lines, what happens? Every single vertical line that I draw on this absolute value graph only crosses the graph in one place. But if I go over here to this sideways parabola, several of the vertical lines cross the graph in two places. So this is not a function because it doesn't pass the vertical line test. You could also see this written as just a plain old set of points. So if you look, you have 3, 5, -1, and 0. None of those x values repeat. But if you look over here at this one in the non-example, 3 outputs 5 and 3 outputs 2. 5 outputs 2 and 6 outputs 5. So this is the problem. 3 has 2 different y's. So you're really looking for repeating x values. Now let's talk about something you already know. Domain and range. Domain is all possible x values, and range is all possible y values. You can see this described a lot of ways. Sometimes we will write these as inequalities. Sometimes we will write them as intervals. Most of the time, you'll see them written as inequalities. So If I'm looking at this grid and I want to figure out the domain, I'm looking at all the possible x values. So for my example, I have an open circle on -3, and my graph is getting bigger, or my x values are getting bigger. So I'm going to say x has to be greater than -3. And going on and on and on, the last x value I use is 1. So my x's have to be smaller than 1. I can combine these two together and I can say x has to be greater than -3, but smaller than -1. The same with my y's. If I look at my y's, the smallest possible y value that I ever use is down here at -4. So my y's are bigger than -4, and I go up, 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 up to 0. So my y's are greater than -4, but smaller than 0. Both of these are equal to. So I could write it again as a compound inequality and say this: y is greater than or equal to 0, and y is less than or equal to -4. And I forgot, in my range, I need to go back since this was a closed dot. I should have a closed dot on 1, or an equal to on 1. Now let's talk a little bit about function notation. I know that you discussed this last year, but it might be a little rusty for you. So, function notation, you typically say f of 4. And then you're given an equation or a table or graph or something, and you have to tell me what the y value would be. So this is basically saying x equals 4. So 4 squared plus 2 times 4 minus 10. Let's see, 4 squared is 16, plus 8 minus 10. Now I can just combine all those numbers together. 16 plus 8 minus 10, and I get 14. So that would be my y value, or my function value at 4. This one says evaluate g of 2 plus g of 1. So the first thing I have to figure out is g of 2. Well, when x equals 2, g of x is -1. So g of 2 is -1. And then g of 1, or when x equals 1, y equals, or g equals 2. And so I just add those two together. -1 plus 2, which gives me 1. So that's my answer. You can also evaluate functions from their graph. If I say evaluate f of 3, I want to know what is y when x equals 3. So go to your graph where x equals 3 and just read me the y value. I would say when x is 3, y is 7. Or I could say f of 3 equals 7. Either one of those mean the exact same thing. Feel free to rewind the video if you need to. And when you finish, show me your notes and you can get your assignment.